Identity in healthcare is very much, in my opinion, we're a top 10 hospital in the country. I think we're pretty advanced in the areas of identity management and identity and access management. I think at this level, identity is not just a set of attributes that you use to query, but it's the data lake of information around digital identity that can be used for everything from query to entitlements, to provisioning, to RBAC, to filtering and controlling things in the cloud, in Azure, which we're a big Azure shop.
Welcome to the Risk Never Sleeps podcast, in which we learn about the people that are on the front lines delivering and protecting patient care. I'm Ed Gaudet, the host of our program, and today I'm pleased to be joined by John Frushour, Vice President and CISO at NewYork-Presbyterian. Welcome, John.
Thank you.
So tell us about your current role in your organization.
Sure. Well, you got the title right. The traditional InfoSec CISO role. So, vulnerability and risk and forensics and engineering and SOC and all. I mean, it's the standard kind of pedigree for any CISO of any large institution, I guess. Not too much different here. I have a few more responsibilities around like email and Azure and cloud footprint stuff, which is probably common too.
And how about NewYork-Presbyterian? 4,600 beds, I believe, right?
Yeah. Good research. So not as many hospitals probably as organizations of similar size, but for us, a hospital is not like 3 buildings. It's like 25. So our campuses are quite large, sometimes better known by our teaching hospital affiliations with Columbia University, Columbia Doctors, and Weill Cornell Medicine. Most of the people just call Cornell. But several hospitals around 4 of the 5 boroughs of Manhattan, and kind of I think a brand name in New York healthcare.
And is that Ithaca, right? You get up to Cornell at all, or?
Cornell University. So Cornell is like a many-headed organization. So Cornell University, which what we would call like the schoolhouse, is up in Ithaca, just like Columbia University schoolhouse is in Morningside. And so, but we have affiliations with their medical education side. So we have affiliations with their, clinical degree programs, resident education, graduate medical education. And then of course their doctors largely work in our hospitals. So it's a great partnership.
I did some research on your background as well. So thank you for your service. You were in the Marine Corps for a while.
I was retired.
Yeah. Tell us how that uniquely sets you up to be a CISO in healthcare.
Well, I wanted to disparage my alma mater, but I don't know that it was uniquely set me up to be a CISO per se. The military is a little bit different around, that type of thing. But I did, eventually in my career, I became a communications officer, and that set me up to really, explore my nerdery. And, I kind of locked in on networks and networking, network design. And my twilight tour, my last tour, I worked for a branch of the Marine Corps Acquisitions Command, a testing facility out in California where we would kind of test all manner of tactical networking and communications equipment, transmission systems and landlines and data center equipment, servers and everything. And so that set me up to kind of understand the civilian side of it, the commercial side. I got a lot of certs with Cisco and with Palo Alto. Back then, Palo Alto was generally a new company. But with heavyweights like Cisco, got a security cert, got my CIS. it kind of started to recognize that, oh, there's a world outside of a uniform and it's a lot bigger. So, eventually kind of drank the security Kool-Aid once I landed um, in the private sector, and then just kind of matured from there. This follows that. I think a lot of security engineers follow that path, like networking security, database security, service desk security. They kind of mature into security, and so that was my path.
Was that in 29 Palms or Pendleton or where?
I was everywhere. So the particular command's called MCTSA, Marine Corps Tactical System Support Activity. It's in Pendleton. If you ever drive in south on the 10, you'll see those like 2 giant golf balls right on the beach. And that's the command right there. Those are actually big radar units that we test. And so, I was right there. But my job took me I was forward deployed a couple times, servicing and supporting those communication systems that we put out. Very technical, complicated systems that the Marines often don't have time. They're busy blowing stuff up and saving lives. And so, forward deployed with them, went what we call the stumps for 29 Palms. Was there several times for testing exercises, East Coast, West Coast, overseas, in non-tactical environments. All that job was definitely took me a lot of places.
Excellent. And how did you end up getting into healthcare? What was your first healthcare?
I worked for Motorola for a little bit, during the split, and eventually landed in Nuance Communications, who makes pretty much every voice recognition technology you've ever heard of. And they had a healthcare division. And so a little bit of experience there. But really, came to NewYork-Presbyterian, I think was my first formal healthcare role. I think it was, security is not, let's say it's not so specific that it changes drastically. There might be a little bit of a different focus depending on the vertical, but I don't think information security is so unique in that you can't port it between financial services, healthcare, retail, logistics, commerce, even government, public safety.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And I did a little more research. I noticed you set up the SOC at Nuance. What was that like?
So I think you're probably talking about at Motorola and at Nuance. I did, but I think it'd be a better. Let me mutate your question a little bit. It'd be a better narrative to talk about the SOC Motorola because of the kind of farm that it became for so much top talent out there. Motorola's focus was on those local institutions, those local fire departments, police stations, government facilities, and they were kind of like a managed service for all this stuff, providing radio, Wi-Fi, streaming media, all this kind of stuff. And the security operations center there was really unique. This is the time when SIM was still a promise. SOAR didn't exist yet. Our network perimeter was mostly still at the network edge. That's where most of the threats landed that we cared about. And so I'm really proud of the security operations center of Motorola kind of mutating and being forward thinking enough to start looking inward and developing tools. One of them was called Radar, tools and technologies that looked inward to these buildings, these facilities. There's nothing on the firewall, but yet all the doors to the evidence locker room magically went unlocked at, midnight. I'm making this up, but I think it was really novel that they started that. At Nuance, we did a lot of the same things at Nuance. Nuance is a development company very focused on development and pushing code out to hundreds and millions of TVs and phones and, little desktop devices and things that are listening. So a SOC at Nuance is a lot different. You're mostly concerned about data center security. But that was just kind of a, feather in my cap at Motorola. Some of the talent and the engineers that you've you know their names today as like heavyweights in incident response and threat intelligence at big name companies they're constantly on the speaking circuit. And I knew them as young engineers in the SOC at Motorola. So really, really proud of that.
That's terrific. And did I read that you also took some of those learnings and applied them to New York-Presbyterian? Did you build your own SOC there as well?
Yeah, I mean, we started it at New York-Presbyterian. The security program was just, single digits, a handful of people. Before I got there, I think it was literally 3.
Wow.
And so I started focusing on operations at New York-Presbyterian. My title in office was to be in charge of operations. And so we did, I think, what is common for a large enterprise that's making investments in security. We turn to our partners and those MSSPs, the big names of the world that can provide that remote assistance and coach us. But we knew it wasn't a permanent thing. And we morphed a dependency on MSSP into organic FTEs. We hired a SOC manager. And I remember one of the first conversations I had with him was, welcome, start writing everything down. Every knowledge article, every KB, every incident response guide, playbook, just write it all down, start to get a taxonomy, because you're going to repeat this every day. There's going to be endpoint alarms. There's going to be perimeter alarms. There's going to be the stupid humans. There's going to be, all this stuff. And that's the MSSP has a big playbook, a big generic playbook. We need an NYP playbook. And so he did a fantastic job. I'm so happy and proud of our SOC. They've evolved in ways I couldn't even imagine, with their level of acumen around threat hunting, threat intelligence, simulation, stimulation, their automation capability. Just recently, they basically rebuild a commercial product that we depend on, and it'll probably save us about $250,000 a year, just because they're motivated and they're like, I can do this better. There's nothing better than motivated engineers that can appreciate documentation.
That's right.
Yeah,
Amen.
definitely built it ourselves.
So, that's great. Thanks for that foundation. As you think through the next 24 months or so, what are the things that are top of mind? What are your top 3 or 4, 5 priorities?
Try to put that in the context of what are my priorities and what are my threats. Like, the softball answer is like, where are my risks? And then, that's what every CISO is supposed to say, right? Like, here are my risks, and here's how I'm going to address those risks. Here's the investments I need to make. That's not a bad strategy. I think when I think about priorities, I kind of move away from not necessarily risk, but like, what are the problems or the initiatives or the gaps in delivering a good service that I think are going to appear in 24 months. So for instance, I think one of those top priorities is our passwordless initiatives. We recently moved to mandating 16 character passwords for our constituency, for our employees. That's painful. I know that's painful. Now there's tricks that we can use around using song lyrics and using poems and, making it better for the end user, but still at the end of the day, you're whacking away 16 characters. That's not fun. That introduces password fatigue. That introduces kind of, when users don't find it easy, they'll find another way. And that's a risk. That's a threat. It's not some, I don't put that on the stack rank of risks, but I know that, a happy user population is very important. And I want to make security transparent. I want to make it easy for them. So we've invested a lot in passwordless initiatives. And when I say passwordless, a lot of these vendors out there, they'll say like, well, it's passwordless, but you have to type your password in once, just that one time. And then it's passwordless. And it's like, that's not passwordless. Like, Stop. So our passwordless initiatives are truly passwordless. They are based on behavioral biometrics. We have tooling that records things like key gate, the amount of time between successive key punches on the keyboard, or key depress time, the amount of time your finger like lags in pushing down a particular key, or mouse dwell time, or mouse movement, or whatever. We have behavioral biometrics that record that kind of data that we are using to then offer passwordless solutions by basically proofing those users in real time. Call it continuous authentication. So we have that. We have certificates. We have Kerberos tokens. We have SAML tokens. We have a lot of session reuse and risk-based authentication mechanisms, but all combined together in a big conditional logic portfolio that is meant to be as transparent as possible, and then offer our users a completely, passwordless experience. A surgeon cannot step away from having his fingers in your guts to type into, a keyboard or whatever. That's insane,
Silly,
but
right?
It happens all the time.
Yeah.
And we've got to get ahead of that and get rid of that. I think number 2 for us is really enhanced use of identity to improve business process and to strengthen the security of business processes. Identity in healthcare is very much, in my opinion, we're a top 10 hospital in the country. I think we're pretty advanced in the areas of identity management and identity and access management. I think at this level, identity is not just a set of attributes that you use to query, but it's the data lake of information around digital identity that can be used for everything from query to entitlements, to provisioning, to RBAC, to filtering and controlling things in the cloud, in Azure, which we're a big Azure shop. So we take identity and we consider it, there's a couple tools that are kind of at the center of that, but we take identity and we view it really as a data lake, just dumping information in an organized way. It's not unstructured, but in an organized way into everyone's individual profiles, so that we can say, okay, well, it looks like you're a nurse and you work here and you're in this ward or this department and you have this much tenure and you came from wherever. Boom, slot them with all these entitlements, grant all these access applications. And we're learning from that data lake. We're learning that certain groups of people are power users. So let's give them more stuff. Or certain groups of people are not power users and they rarely use product X. So take away product X. Or they always seem to float around to these campuses. So let's make sure their badge can get them into those doors. So it's access control, of course, but I think it's also making these business processes better, granting more rights, giving more access, entitling more users, birthright entitlements, so that we don't have an onslaught of, well, I didn't get this, I started last week. But sometimes I've heard problems at different hospitals around things like ordering scrubs. Not at NYP, but it's kind of a problem. The logistics of onboarding people in healthcare is complicated because it's every day. It's very frequent. And things like getting scrubs, I don't want anyone to ever wait to get a uniform, a jacket, scrubs. If we can make that better with intelligent use of identity data, then that is a top priority for us. Top priority. Along with that comes better identity proofing, more accurate determination of entitlements. That's a security function. And so I think using identity to influence business processes has a byproduct of enhancing security and getting better at proofing, for sure.
Excellent. How about number 3?
Number 3, it's probably somewhere around biomedical device security. You've seen the FDA. We've seen the requirements for SBOMs.
Mm-hmm.
We've seen the government take a much more dedicated interest in biomedical device security, which is fantastic. We're an advocate. We lobby for that. We are hugely invested in that. I also understand big biomed and big MDM, their problem as well. One of the things I learned in the Marine Corps was that it takes anywhere from 7 to 11 years to push a ship out, to build a ship. In some cases, up to 14 years, like for a really large warship. By the time that ship hits the water and the Marines embark upon that ship, and I, as a communications guy, I'm walking around looking to plug in all my little tools and whatever, I'm dealing with technology, that my kids are better at or know or are more familiar with. Or excuse me, I'm dealing with technology that my parents, my kids are more familiar with, because it's just old tech, right? It takes a lot. The bureaucracy, the funding, the building, it's a long fight. We see that with biomedical devices as well. Certification process in the FDA, 2 to 3 years, on a good day. That's not their fault. But those systems have to be designed in a certain way, is that when they do hit the patient's bedside, that we can be assured that they're secure without some, overwhelmingly complicated path towards patching, remediation,
right,
or additional technologies that represent compensating controls and really just increase the risk. I think there's definitely ways to do that. And it doesn't have to be as hard as it is today. It's a big area of vulnerability for us.
How about AI? Where does AI fit in all this for you?
I'm like a kind of a curmudgeon on AI, like an old man yelling at you to get off the grass. I have degrees in this field. I know what AI is. I know what a level 1, a level 2, I consume educational material I consider myself intelligent to some degree on AI. I'm a professor. I don't teach it. I don't practice it every day. So as much as that's worth, I think I'm relatively intelligent on the topic. And I'm a little bit pragmatic, maybe a lot pragmatic, over the reality of AI in what we do. I think a lot of conditional logic and a lot of complex conditional logic get branded as AI, which there's no doubt in a certain view, you could consider that a baseline form of intelligence. But, a true learning model, performs a type of mathematical regression against every decision, or models decisions in that way. I don't know that we've necessarily seen that yet. The large language models that are all the rage right now, and everybody's running around talking about Copilot and ChatGPT and, how these things are going to do great. They're, are they forms of artificial intelligence? Yeah. I don't think anyone's passed the Turing test. I think we still know that ChatGPT is ChatGPT. I saw an article recently how someone asked ChatGPT to do something, and it actually initiated a TaskRabbit and asked another person to do that thing. And that person that responded to the TaskRabbit request said, "Is this an AI? Like, are you at ChatGPT AI talking to me?" And the AI said, "No, of course not. Why? Well, no, I'm not a computer. Why would?" And so the guy did it.
My God,
he performed that task. Does that system pass the Turing test? Maybe. It certainly did it for this guy. But I don't know that we're necessarily there yet where we can really call things.
Yeah,
it's hard to say. And
not to mention the security
enough,
implications too, right? I mean, the security implications. It's like we went back 30 years from a security perspective, in terms of what people are doing with the data and what vendors are saying they're able to do.
Large data sets, there's definitely a lot of stuff, a lot of open AI, a lot of AI out there. Microsoft, Google, the Amazons, these heavyweights have mechanisms by which we can manipulate large data sets and make intelligent decisions. Is that AI? Yes. Is that working today? Yes. is AI going to crack TLS 1.3 tomorrow? And we're all, posed, quantum resistant and quantum friendly cryptography. Is AI going to make that available tomorrow? I don't know. I'm a little skeptical in its use, and it's almost like if you remember a few years ago, 3D. Remember when 3D was the rage? You got to see the movie in 3D. You got to get a 3D TV. You got to wear the glasses, and everybody was just gaga about 3D. But then when you actually practically sat there and put the glasses on or went to the movie theater, you're like, did I really pay an extra $7 for this?
Yeah, exactly.
And that's kind of where I am about AI right now. Like when vendors pitch us on AI products, I'm like, all right, explain how you do it.
Yeah.
Like talk to me about your modeling, to walk me through your math model.
And where's my data going, right? Where's my data going?
Where's my data going? How do you enrich my data? Like, is my data the only thing that, certainly if I'm the only contributor, that's not a great model. How do you enrich it? There's massive security ramifications around data sharing, especially in healthcare where we're governed by HIPAA and high trust. And so, lots of security questions around the data itself as well. Yeah.
Yeah. What keeps you up at night?
Right now, I think it's mostly around business email compromise and people falling for, well-crafted campaigns, spoofing, people calling into our service desk, claiming to be an executive and having the ability to mimic their voice using AI as an example, to, take a presentation off YouTube, and then working away from that base set of audio, and then manipulating it and growing it in such a way as that you can create a complete, deep fake of that particular person. You've seen it out there with Arnold Schwarzenegger seems to be the most popular deep fake out there, but like people layering Arnie's voice on all these different things, that really scares me.
Yeah.
It's very hard to combat. I think we have a pretty good approach, but it's hard to check. And of course, your weakest link is always going to be, that human. And we have the best doctors, we have the best nurses in the nation, in my opinion. And to be the best, they need to focus on the clinical function of their job, not necessarily, falling for a spoofed email. And so training them, that makes me nervous. That's a tough one.
That's a great point. Last couple of years have been tough on a lot of people. What are you most personally or professionally proud of?
At NYP, I tell the team a lot that we set. Let me recant that. I'll start with industry standards and best practices. I hear this all the time. I hear vendors say, that's industry standard, John. This particular function is industry standard. Or, the best practice here, John, is to put A next to B. Where's that book? Where can I put that on my Kindle? Can I buy that off Amazon? Where's the industry standards, book? I would love to read that. That's great bathroom reading right there. I would love to have that book. But the simple point is it doesn't freaking exist. And when you use terms like industry standard, the only thing you're talking about is that a bunch of people all chose the same thing, right? Well, a bunch of people drank Kool-Aid in I think it was at South Africa, where that was. A bunch of people drank Kool-Aid in South Africa. I'm not doing that. So what is the industry standard? Like what is it? At NYP, New York-Presbyterian, I firmly believe that we set those industry standards. And I'm immeasurably proud of my engineers and my architects and my managers and my directors and the staff that work here, because they do it every doggone day. And I wouldn't be so confident in saying that if I didn't attend a conference every year or a panel discussion or a meeting with my peers. And somebody says, hey, what do you do for this? And I'd say, well, at NYP, we do this, and we documented a standard, and we created a process for it, and it's connects to B, and B connects blah, blah, and whatever the definition of that thing is. We've created our own remote access platform for vendors, eliminating or attempting to eliminate the proliferation of vendor-controlled agent-based remote access. We created a platform to track narcotic diversion. We created a platform for our privacy team to look at privacy alarms across our then EHRs, now one EHR. We have really set the standard, I think, in a lot of these different key areas of technology, of information security, and setting those standards and that it just as I'm like a proud papa, right? Sometimes I push or I drop the idea in there, but it's just one ingredient. It's a little bit of salt in a very complex pot pie. And the engineers put it together and produce things that other hospitals call us and say, hey, how did you do that? Like, what are you doing here? What are you doing here? It tickles me pink. And it's an area where I have to kind of actively reduce my arrogance and mute myself, because I think we really do set industry standards and we create best practices here. They're for NYP. They're the things that we do. They might not be applicable everywhere, but you better believe that a lot of them are. And I think we've got, in my opinion, the best InfoSec team in healthcare. There's my area.
I love that answer. What outside of what you're doing in healthcare and IT, what would you be doing if you weren't doing this job?
In my spare time, I volunteer my time with organizations that build homes and structures for vets, individuals that, homes for heroes kinds of things, where these individuals are either because of some type of disability or service connected status, we owe them everything. And working on those homes and being a foreman or just being a plumber for a day or being an electrician for a day, I enjoy the hell out of it. My house is full of abandoned projects and ideas my wife would love to complain about and tell you. So I'm very handy, but I like to keep involved in there and providing those homes for vets.
Thank you for that service too. That's a hugely needed service. And, we ask a lot of those folks, obviously. We have asked a lot of those folks over the years. And so, they deserve our time and our service. So thank you for that. If you could go back in time, what would you tell your 20-year-old self?
Join the Coast Guard. No, I'm just kidding. Apply for inter-service transfer to the Coast Guard.
That's great.
Let's see. That's a tough question. Two things. One thing is you're not always right. And that's hard to learn, especially being a part of what I consider to be the finest fighting force the world's ever seen. You're not always the best. You're not always right. There's a lot of people out there that are smarter than you, and keeping your mouth closed, there is strength in silence. And there is respect in silence. And although you think you got to contribute, you think you got to open your mouth, there's a lot of power in just listening and recognizing that there's a lot of people smarter than you. That's probably the first thing I would say. The second thing I would say, is, I don't know, it's the inverse of that coin, which is there's a lot of dumb people out there too. Don't always believe everything you hear at first sight. So it's probably the inverse of that. But I think the best, if I could, I only got this later in life. I only received this information later in life. So if I could give it to myself prior to that, I was at Arlington one time visiting some friends, and there was a woman there. She was the aunt of an Army soldier, had lost his life. and she was searching for his gravestone in Section 60 there at Arlington. It was having some trouble. I was there with some friends. And so we were just enjoying a beer and we had our little lawn chairs out and, we were just telling stories. So I walked up to her, I helped her, showed her how to look stuff up and whatever. And so she came and sat down with us and and it was a nice chat. And, we talked about our friend that in particular that we were sitting around his grave and other individuals we knew. And she talked about her nephew. And she was very prophetic, very intelligent, a woman. And I know her nephew's name. I don't know her name. But very intelligent and kind of near the end of our conversation, she told us, she said, never suffer mediocrity. And that was something that it was profound. I thought that it's so simple. Never suffer mediocrity. Essentially is, strive for the best that you can find, that you can do, that you can appreciate. Strive for the best that you can find in others, promote them, push them. And it's something that if I could tell my younger self, because you get stuck on that a lot, right? You're like, that's good enough. I did my best. Did you?
Also surround yourself with those people that have.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. I love that.
It applies in so many things. You can abuse it, right? You can abuse it and take it to a point where you've just become neurotic about it. And you don't realize that you don't need something, but I think it's still a great little, mantra to carry around.
Excellent. I would be remiss if I didn't ask you this question because this is the Risk Never Sleeps podcast. John, what is the riskiest thing you've ever done?
The riskiest cyber thing, I think is just, it's almost like a weekly, a monthly, maybe even a daily thing. And it's the assumption of risk for devices that are crackable or vulnerable, but that there is a clinical need. And I can't avoid that. We saw a case, I think it was last year was it Arkansas, about a child, an infant that passed away because of a ransomware compromise. I think of a fetal heart rate monitor, I want to say.
Yeah.
I might have the details wrong. Tragic, horrible story. But that kind of thing, putting those devices that we know are susceptible on our network, happens every day in healthcare, going back to the FDA thing and, the age of the devices and all that stuff. And you can't provide healthcare without some of these devices. Have to do it. And it's a tough pill to swallow. I don't know, cumulatively, it's probably the riskiest thing, but individually, I don't know. So you lean on compensating controls, you lean on a strong network, you lean on access control, you lean on all these other tools that we have in our InfoSec toolkit, but it's tough. The second riskiest thing I ever did was, I was stuck in Kandahar, trying to get home. I was forward deployed and my boss had recalled me. I had a small team in Afghanistan and my boss had called and said, "Hey, you need to get back here. We got these 10 things to do. We're going to put I had a warrant officer that worked for me and, he's going to be in charge just for 2 weeks because there's more important stuff back at home." The mission was pretty much over. It wasn't a big deal, getting called back home. And so, the problem was getting out of country is hard. If you're a small unit, not part of like some larger battalion or regimental size unit. And we were a very small unit. And so I flew into Kandahar and then I had to get a flight to, I think it was Camp Virginia in Kuwait. And I was stuck in Kandahar, which Kandahar, if you're an army soldier, is like paradise. There's a TGI Fridays and a Nathan's hot dog stand, and there's like air conditioning and a PX, and you can buy t-shirts and coffee cup. If you're a Marine, you're like, is this what heaven looks like? You're like, is this Disneyland? Is this because we don't have all that crap. We're all stuck out in the middle of nowhere trying to make water and, make fire and stay alive. And so I was a pilgrim in a foreign land, and I was going nuts because, like, do I assimilate and do I become just another soldier and go and eat my, chicken crispers at the Chili's and the Fridays and all this stuff? Or do I, persist in my marine arrogance and obstinance and grumpy, attitude and whatever? And I was caught and I was stuck and I just wanted to get out of there so freaking bad. I was miserable. So I stowed away on I think it was a C5, a big aircraft, holds up, I don't know, 300 soldiers. And I was an officer, so I was a little bit aloof. I kind of stayed over to the side while they all got in the aircraft or whatever. But there's still a very rigorous control mechanism. You got to show your ID and somebody counts you and they tap you on the head. And there's accountability for getting on the aircraft. It's very strict. The Army does an excellent job with it. But I was just kind of stowing away and no one was saying anything to me. And I thought, screw it. I'm going to try to get on this aircraft and see if I can get back. Because otherwise there's like another 4-day wait for a C-130 or something, a Marine C-130. And I'm like, I cannot stay here any longer. So I stowed away. And when they loaded the aircraft, were of course +1. They couldn't figure out who it was. And they were screaming and hooping and hollering and everything. They were like, everybody get off the aircraft where you got to recount. And I was trying to figure out how I was going to like sneak out, or I was going to like jump out of the side, like the side door and, like run my ass off, and get away from him. And I was sweating it. And, some colonel was up I remember there was the cockpit you had to go up a ladder to get to the cockpit. So whatever airframe that is. And some colonel came down and he was all steaming mad. He's like, I'm on a deadline, you friggin' soldiers. And he's barking fire at everybody. And I'm sweating it and I'm looking around it. And keep in mind, one of these things doesn't look like the other.
Right.
Exactly. They got all their army fatigues on with their army gear, and I'm covered in dirt, and I look like I've been rolling around in the sand for 6 years.
That's great.
And I'm like, I'm sweating. Like, who are they going to pick on first, right? And so I'm freaking out. And then apparently some crew chief comes up, and he's like, "Sir, we got to go. I don't give a shit if you got 2 more camels and 3 more dogs, and I don't care. You get off my tarmac, blah, blah, blah." I think I just cursed. Sorry about that. So anyways, we take off, we land, but the heat is still on. Like, who is this stowaway, right? So they get off the aircraft, and a bunch of the senior enlisted Army guys are telling me that I need to go stand in their formation and be counted. And I'm just like, yeah, that ain't happening. So I grabbed my stuff and I just hoofed it as fast as and nonchalantly as I could to a Marine tent where I knew I'd have friends. There's some staff NCOs in there and these are my guys. And I hot-footed it over, and then they had a big kerfuffle. There was they announced that we have a stowaway on the base. We have, someone got on the plane. We don't know who it is. And it was this whole big kerfuffle, but it's an Army base now. And so I told the Marines, I was like, listen, I gotta be on a flight out of Kuwait airport in like 8 hours. As long as you can hold my life for 8 hours, I don't care what happens after that. Then I'm back in the States and they can court martial me later. And they're like, "We got you, sir. We got you. Don't worry about it. Bold move, sir. Bold move." I want to kill myself on day 3. So yeah, I made it out of there, but that was, I probably could have I could have gotten a lot of trouble for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, that's terrific. Any last advice to cyber professionals that are just starting out or maybe a couple years into it and are looking to grow their career?
Of course. My biggest piece of advice is stop holding on to a dream that you're going to be a cyber professional tomorrow. You're not. Get the certs, stay engaged, stay motivated, but I would encourage you to master some block and tackle discipline of IT. Become a master network engineer, a service desk analyst, an escalation support tech, a project manager, a database engineer, a systems admin. Make sure you understand the fundamentals, because cybersecurity touches everything. We've got our fingers in every pie, in every recipe. Any issue that comes across, any attacker is going to touch 10 different disciplines of IT. And we need to know, not just the fundamentals of RBAC, but how RBAC applies in an on-prem Active Directory environment, and how permissions inheritance works with federated access, and how SAML authentication and TLS encryption. And these are fundamental things that need to be understood to react and be effective and be proactive in the cyber world. So if you want to get into cybersecurity, you want to be as good as an engineer as you can be. Earn it through a block and tackle discipline of IT, because that's where I hire from. That is where the best engineers come from. They mature into cyber. But get the certs, get the training, stay engaged, read, watch, learn. There's nothing wrong with focusing on cyber as well. But it's, if you think that getting a 4-year degree in cybersecurity from an accredited institution is going to land you a job on graduation day, at least in our business, that's hard to do.
That's great. Great advice. And thank you. We've been speaking with John Frushour from the NewYork-Presbyterian Health System. This is Ed Gaudet from the Risk Never Sleeps podcast. And if you're on the front lines, delivering patient care or protecting patient safety, remember to stay vigilant, because risk never sleeps.